Welcome back to Tolkien Adaptation Month. Now let's talk about just a little bit of the music based on Tolkien.
Dave's Obsession of the moment.
For a world that originated in a text-based medium, music is a big part of Middle-earth's DNA. In-universe, Middle-earth was literally created with a song, and The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings are filled with characters singing, and music plays a big part in setting the tone of the adaptations, whether it's Howard Shore's sweeping adventurous score, Glenn Yarborough's mellow folk songs, or the greatest song ever written.
Where there's a whip, we don't wanna go to war today.
And not only does music factor into the vast majority of Tolkien adaptations, some adaptations are nothing but music. So today, I'm going to look at some of the music inspired by Middle-earth. This will be in no way comprehensive. There are just so many concept albums inspired by Tolkien, entire bands named after Middle-earth characters and locations, parody songs about hobbits. It would be impossible for me to find them all, let alone cover them all. I am not Haunted Mansioning this. But I will discuss a few musical adaptations that I find particularly noteworthy, starting with the first. I briefly touched on this in year one, but a composer named Donald Swann composed a song cycle where he put music to several of the songs in Tolkien's text, music that was approved by Tolkien himself. Swann was best known as part of the musical comedy duo Flanders and Swann, so his involvement in a Tolkien adaptation might have been kind of a surprise. A comedy musician doing a Tolkien adaptation? That'd be like if a Lord of the Rings adaptation involved, say, half of Flight of the Conchords, to come up with a completely absurd and not at all believable example.
My lady.
A book with the sheet music was published in 1967, and then after that, a record was released called Poems and Songs from Middle-earth. I touched on this record last week because half of the record is Tolkien himself reading poetry. And the other half of the record is Swann's music, with him playing piano, with vocals by the very appropriately named William Elvin. I am in no way a music expert. I can't really describe music very well. I just know how it feels to me. And I gotta say, this really does feel British.
I must follow if I can.
I do mean that in a good way. Again, maybe it's just the Episcopalian upbringing talking, but this really does feel like an Anglican hymn that you would sing in a great hall, and I don't know if that feels right for Bilbo Baggins, but it definitely feels right for J.R.R. Tolkien. I don't know if this music would work as well for the version of the poem that's in The Hobbit, but for the more melancholy version in Lord of the Rings, I think this really does capture the emotion of the lyrics. But if you don't like it, we're about to get a bit more upbeat.
On the hearth the fire is red, beneath the roof there is a bed.
Now this, of course, is the walking song that the Hobbit sing in Book 1, Chapter 3, Three is Company, which is also the song that the song Pippin sings to Denethor in the third movie comes from. I do not think that scene would work quite as well if Pippin was using this tune.
Water and the sky, pass them by, pass them by.
But again, for the song's actual place in the book, this feels bouncy and hobbity, and I dig it. It's worth noting that in one of the correspondences I talked about last week between Tolkien and BBC producer Terence Tiller, Tolkien claimed that while a few of the songs in the text were written to specific tunes he had in mind, most of them were not. So Tolkien's approval of the music on this record doesn't necessarily mean they're what he had in mind, they just didn't go against whatever he had in mind. And apparently the one piece that did go against what he had in mind is Namarie, aka Galadriel's Lament in Lorien. That was the one piece where Tolkien was dissatisfied with what Swann brought forth, and he dictated a little more how it should go, which might be why it's the least melodic piece here.
Lauriel antalassi surinen, ieni unotte me vera maraldaron, ieni velinte iulder avanier.
I mean, this is a lament, so it doesn't not make sense, and I'm sure Tolkien had his reasons for making this piece basically tuneless, but maybe this piece just shouldn't have been put to music. Oh, interesting. The Song of Elbereth is the same tune as The Road Goes Ever, Ever On. I don't know if we're supposed to believe that Bilbo took that tune and put his own words to it, and it's just an ancient Elvish tune that Bilbo happened to know, or if this is not supposed to be the music actually in universe. This music only exists in our world. But either way, it's weird to hear a reprise of Road Goes Ever, Ever On that isn't inexplicably about how easy it is not to try. And that was Donald Swan's Tolkien music. For a man who was known for musical comedy, he sure took the work of Tolkien seriously. And now let's look at someone who's known for more serious work, who took Tolkien way less seriously.
In the middle of the earth, in the land of Shire.
Come on, sing along, you all know the words.
We all admire with his long wooden pipe, fuzzy woolly toes.
This infamous video comes from the July 28, 1967 episode of a variety show called Malibu U, which was like all about, surf culture. It was hosted by Ricky Nelson. That's what you want for your Tolkien adaptations. It was written by Charles Randolph Green, who 17 years earlier did the arrangement on Nat King Cole's iconic version of the Christmas song. And then he wrote this.
Just like to eat and be left alone, but one day Bilbo was asked to go on a big adventure to the caves below.
I don't know what there is to say about this that hasn't already been said. It's iconic. Okay, that was fun. Let's go back to composers who took Tolkien a little more seriously. I talked last year about Bo Hansen, who had a concept album called Music Inspired by Lord of the Rings, and made a movie, generously speaking, of that album. Originally, the album was released in Sweden as Sagan om Ringen, which is the Swedish title of Lord of the Rings that I'm probably still mispronouncing. But when it came time to release the album internationally, Tolkien's publishers insisted the album title be changed to Music Inspired by Lord of the Rings, making it legally distinct from any authorized Lord of the Rings adaptation. I have no idea what they had to say about the televised version, if it was even on their radar. Since my introduction to this album was the televised version I covered last year, I was surprised to find that Bo Hansen's album and Bo Hansen's movie don't align exactly. The first track of the album is Leaving Shire, which happens about 4 minutes into the movie. And then the album skips right to Tom Bombadil, despite the movie being one of the few adaptations to include Gildor's tribe along the way. No track for Gildor on the album, so the track the movie uses for the first Black Rider appearance is actually the track written for Fog on the Barrow Downs, a scene which the movie skips.
Frodo hörde hovslag och hoborna gömde sig i mörkret vid sidan av vägen. Hovslagen upphörde och Frodo skymtade något mörkt.
The composer of this album directed this movie, and apparently changed his mind about what was worth including and which music was for which part. And the album goes further than the movie does. The movie ends as the Fellowship leaves Rivendell, but the album has tracks inspired by moments throughout the books, including Lothlorien, Pelennor Fields, The Scouring of the Shire, and The Grey Havens. I guess Jackson's decision to make Lothlorien really unsettling has more precedent than I thought. Okay, I dig Shadowfax's theme. It feels like it belongs in the horse riding level of a Sega Genesis game. We got a lot of crappy Tolkien video games, but we were robbed of an early 90s poorly adapted side-scroller. Look, I'm digging this music, but I can't tell if it's supposed to represent Sharky's destruction or the cleaning up afterwards. I will be honest, Bo Hansen's music is not the genre that comes to mind when I imagine Middle-earth. At its best, I think this album does capture some of the mood of the story, but for much of the runtime, the emotions I feel from the tracks don't necessarily match the emotions I feel from their corresponding chapters. But as a separate creative project inspired by the text, I actually like this a lot. It's moody and atmospheric and emotional, and while I don't always hear Lord of the Rings in it, I definitely hear a fantastical realm beyond my understanding. And if the music a composer hears when reading the book doesn't match the music I hear in my head, that's good. That's honestly what's great about art and creativity, about people bringing their own ideas to things, about people bringing their perspectives and their interpretations. How boring would it be if everybody imagined these books exactly the same way? I'd barely get 1 month of videos out of that. Now let's move from Sweden to Denmark and look at the Tolkien Ensemble. The Tolkien Ensemble was founded in 1995 with approval from the Tolkien estate, and they made it their mission to put every song in Lord of the Rings to music. That is an impressive feat, and I am not going to review every single one of their songs because, again, do you know how many songs are in these books? It's a lot. But after several tours and several albums, they did it. They created a version of every song and poem in Lord of the Rings. Now, admittedly, some of the poems they don't actually sing to music. Some of the poems just have music playing underneath them, and the poems are just recited. But they're recited by Sir Christopher Lee.
3 rings of the elven kings under the sky.
That's right, the biggest Tolkien fan there ever was, with the most powerful voice there ever was. Hearing him do the Rings poem is enough to just send chills down your spine.
9 for mortal men doomed to die. 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie.
This long-running collaboration between Lee and the ensemble also gave Lee the chance to play additional characters beyond the one we all saw him play in the movie.
Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. There shall be shown a token that doom is near at hand. For Isildur's bane shall waken, and the halfling forth shall stand.
It actually allowed him to fulfill his lifelong dream of playing Gandalf.
Ere iron was found, or tree was hewn, when young was mountain under moon.
But if you ask me, the character Christopher Lee is best at in these recordings? Treebeard.
In the willow meads of Tassarinan, I walked in the spring. Ah, the sight and the smell of the spring.
I know that Peter Jackson let John Rhys Davies play Treebeard so that he could play a character in the films who didn't give him an allergic reaction, but how great would it have been if Christopher Lee had been the actor playing dual roles with Treebeard?
I wandered in summer in the elm woods of Ossiriand.
It honestly would have been pretty thematically appropriate. Have the same actor play the two opposing forces in the battle for Isengard. Have the same actor play the character who represents Tolkien's love of nature and the character who represents the evils of disdain for nature.
Come, join the moot. We are off. We are off to Isengard. To Isengard. To Isengard.
No disrespect to John Rhys Davies' version as Treebeard, you know, having that be the dual roles still made more sense than having the same guy play Aragorn and Gollum, but I really think Christopher Lee would have been a great Treebeard. Also, no disrespect to Andy Serkis, whose audiobook is very good, but man, we were robbed of a Christopher Lee audiobook of the entire trilogy. I'm pretty sure he could have just shown up in the booth and recited most of it from memory. Anyway, here's just scattered thoughts I have on some of the songs here.
Hey, come Derry Dot, up along my hearties, hobbits, ponies, oh, we are fond of parties. Now...
So if we're counting the Tolkien Ensemble's body of work as a narrative adaptation, this is definitely the adaptation to feature the most Bombadil.
Tree and flower and leaf and grass. Let them pass.
Once again, Pippin singing this tune to Denethor would have really changed that scene.
Mist and twilight, cloud and shade.
Away shall fade, away shall fade. We must away at break of day, far over wood and mountain tall.
Okay, so this song is set in the text to be to the same tune as Misty Mountain's Cold, and yeah, I like this one. Another good version of that song, but I imagine the Dwarves version was probably in a minor key.
To Rivendell, where elves yet dwell, in glades beneath the misty fell.
This version has the intrigue of adventure, but it doesn't quite have the discomfort.
And whither then we cannot tell.
The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began.
And that's just a quick glance at the music of the Tolkien Ensemble, the most complete musical adaptation of Lord of the Rings. I highly recommend doing the deep dive and listening to them all because it's amazing that they pulled it off. Now, as for less complete musical adaptations, there was the stage musical adaptation. Okay, so there have been numerous Tolkien stage adaptations over the years, mostly of The Hobbit, because that's the children's story that more easily translates to the stage. And of course, there have been parody Lord of the Rings musicals, and I think there had been other serious attempts to turn Lord of the Rings into a stage musical before this, but early attempts are even less documented than this one. This one is the one people think of when they think of the Lord of the Rings musical. And there was certainly a lot of buzz as this one was being developed. Mostly buzz of the how are they gonna pull that off variety. They certainly made an attempt, with composers including the Finnish band Vartina and then future Oscar winner A.R. Rahman, and a commitment to impressive special effects on stage. The producers really wanted to do this right. So it debuted in Toronto in 2006, where it ran for just a little over half a year, and then it moved to London, where it ran for about twice that long, but still closed at a massive loss. And it probably would have gone down as the most notorious musical flop based on a long-beloved piece of pop culture with a prominent movie adaptation in the early 2000s, had a new challenger not emerged 5 years later. And yes, I'm just as mad as you are that Lord of the Rings didn't get a Letterman performance. But I can't really speak to the show itself, the staging, or the effects or anything because I didn't see it live. There are a couple of bootlegs floating around, but the visual quality is, how do I put this gently, unwatchable? So I'm not really going to talk about the show, I'm just going to focus on these songs as they are presented in the original cast recording. Now, several of the pieces on the cast recording are just in Elvish. I certainly respect that, but I imagine that was one of the many uphill battles this musical faced finding an audience. So the second track is called The Road Goes On.
There's a road calling you to stray.
I thought it said it's called The Road Goes On, but this sounds like something else.
Under moon and star, take the road no matter how far.
I mean, it sounds like a musical number from a musical, but it's not The Road Goes On, is it?
Don't look back, follow where it goes. Far beyond the sun. Take the road wherever it runs. The road goes on, ever, ever on.
Oh, I guess it is The Road Goes On, in title alone.
Field by field, style by style.
Styles upon styles.
The road goes on, ever, ever on. The road goes on, ever, ever on.
It's not bad, but it's not The Road Goes Ever On. I guess my core problem with this is the same as my core problem with Seussical. You're adapting an author with an immediately recognizable lyricism, an author who has written so much that would translate to music quite easily, and then you're writing lyrics that don't sound like that author, leading me to wonder if the only reason you bothered adapting this author in the first place was the brand recognition.
There's an inn of old renown where they brew a beer so brown. Moon came rolling down the hill one heaven's day night to drink his fill.
There are a couple of songs here that take the place of songs from the book and evoke those songs a tiny bit in the lyrics, but they're just not those songs.
Called by the fiddle to the middle of the muddle with the cow with the capers and the smalls all squealing. Moon in a fuddle went to huddle by the griddle, but he slipped in a muddle and the world went reeling.
The Tolkien ensemble already proved that all these songs can work to music, and I don't understand why you wouldn't at least make the songs sound a little more like the songs in the book. Do you just not want to pay the Tolkien estate songwriting royalties on top of the other royalties?
In the middle by the griddle and the moon slept till staring day.
There are also some tracks that are just score, presumably while action is happening. And that's fine, but it's not what I listen to a musical cast recording for. Now, I do like how the tracks that are just score don't sound like retreads of Howard Shore's score for the movies, but that may have been another uphill battle for audiences who only just got into Lord of the Rings 5 years earlier. There is one song I like a lot in this album, and that is Now and For Always.
Sing me a story of heroes of the Shire, muddling through, brave and true.
Like the others, this isn't a direct lyrical adaptation of Tolkien, but it is based on the conversation in the book about the great stories and will their story be told, and I think it gets the emotion of the exchange across rather well.
Now and for always, Harfoot supplanted, and Storefolk who plowed, bred to endure, slow but sure.
This is the only song that feels like it really fulfills the potential of a Lord of the Rings musical. Take the core emotion of the most important relationship in the book, translate it to song, and do it well.
To stay the same, now and for always.
Condensing the entirety of Lord of the Rings down to a 3-hour play was probably a fool's errand from the get-go, but this makes it feel like they could have made this work if they just focused on Frodo and Sam's relationship for the entire show. You know, like the Finnish play that was televised did.
To share stories we tell will cast their spell now and for always.
And then Now and For Always has an almost immediate ironic villain reprise with Gollum and Smeagol.
Smeagol promised to help Master. Sit by the fire, lights glow. Tell us an old tale we know. Take the precious.
This feels like half the reason the musical was pitched. Take the Smeagol-Gollum conflict and turn it into a one-man duet. They must have been so sure this would become a huge audition piece going forward.
A Baggins stole it from us. We hate Bagginses. No, not this one.
The problem is it's not musical enough. Gollum sings a little bit, but he also kind of Rex Harrisons his way through parts of his argument with himself.
They'll hurt us. There's 2 of them. Don't have to wake. Won't let them wake. Be long chance, Michael. Be the best. He speaks nice to me. No one else does. Take the precious. Pass the test.
I prefer a new edition of a Mordor Inquisition than to ever let a Baggins in my life.
Just leave it behind. Kill them. Not going to take it. Not how do you do it. No one.
And then other parts just aren't lyrics. Gollum's just yelling dialogue at himself while music plays in the background.
I don't want to. Please. Just want it. Get it. Take it. Hurt it. Kill it. No. We promised. Not us.
So much of this musical falls just short of its potential. But then it feels like they run out of songs long before they run out of story, and the last handful of tracks are all score. So it really feels like they did not go all the way with turning Lord of the Rings into an actual musical. And again, it was probably a fool's errand from the get-go, but it feels like it should have more songs at least. It also just seems like they didn't use their song time wisely. Like, a lot of the early songs feel superfluous, the later bits don't have songs at all, and they're condensing the story. Couldn't they have found creative ways to musically narrate parts that they had to brush through otherwise? You know, like the BBC radio production did with the Battle of Pelennor Fields? I don't know, maybe the whole thing actually did work better on stage. It just unfortunately did not work well enough to find enough of an audience to make its money back. But the story of this musical is not necessarily over yet. Just this year, it was reworked and revived again. And by reworked, I mean scaled way down, and revived as The Lord of the Rings, A Musical Tale, running as a limited engagement. It was limited on purpose this time, it wasn't cut short.
Sing me a story of heroes of the Shire.
In the east, the Dark Lord is rising once more. He hunts far and wide for his lost ring.
So small a thing. So plain and yet so powerful.
I again didn't see this show because it was in Berkshire, which is not exactly an easy trip from Anaheim, but I actually heard decent things about the production, that scaling it down to a more intimate version and steering into more limited resources actually made the show work better. So, who knows, maybe this scaled down production will tour someday, or maybe the whole show will be reworked again in the future, or given the pro shot treatment at some point, and if that happens, maybe I'll talk about it someday. But for now, I respect the ambition of the past productions, and I like Now and For Always, but I'm not exactly adding the rest of this to my ultimate Tolkien music playlist. And that's just some of the music inspired by Middle-earth. And before we go, I know I gotta address rock music inspired by Tolkien, the music he would probably hate the most. Again, not doing a comprehensive list of rock songs that mention Tolkien, there's just way too many, but rock and roll's relationship with Middle-earth is fascinating because so much of it seems to be based on this stuff seems cool, and only some of it is actually engaging with the narrative.
Was in the darkest depths of Mordor. Oh, I met a girl so fair.
Everyone knows Mordor is the happening place to pick up chicks.
That evil one crept up and slipped away with her.
Yep, that's right. When I think Gollum, I think Mr. Steal Your Girl. Look at him, he's pure Riz.
Gotcha fish, so juicy, sweet.
Was this not actually a girl? It was actually The Ring, and you just saw it as a girl for some reason? Either because of some dark spell or because you're stoned out of your gourd? Come on, Matthew from News Radio songs were more accurate adaptations.
The hobbits and the gnomes, they're dancing to and fro. They have to keep the +2 sword from the chaotic evil thief lord.
It's just so fascinating to me how many rock stars wanted to be part of Middle-earth. Like, when Mick Jagger heard that Ralph Bakshi was making Lord of the Rings, he tried to get the role of Frodo. The role of Frodo had already been recorded, so it was too late, but just imagine what that would have been like.
Please allow me to introduce myself.
Of course, the trivia that Mick Jagger wanted to be Frodo was overshadowed by the other British invasion group that tried to be in Lord of the Rings, but their version was never made. Until next week!